So thank you for talking with me. Um, let's start with where and when you were born.
You want to record now?
I am.
You're recording?
Yep.
Okay. Um, well, let me just begin just by acknowledging the way that I've been taught that I acknowledge the Creator and my ancestors, um, because it's not about me. It's really about how I got here in the lineage. My father is Jorge Perez Tello Tapilan Coavitecan from San Antonio area of Texas. We have lineage that goes back many generations there. My mom, Maria Susolaga Ramos, from Chihuahua, Mexico, and they hooked up, got together, and had children. Some of us born in Texas, and some of us born in Los Angeles. And I ended up being raised, um, from a small child on in Compton and Watts, South Central Los Angeles, during the 50s and 60s, and which if you look historically, that was a tremendous time of consciousness and civil rights movement, Chicano movement. I was just entering high school around that age when the Watts blowouts, or Watts riots, as some people call them, and so I experienced great upheaval. But I had experienced from a young child, up until then, saw a lot of injustice, saw a lot of mistreatment of not only people that looked like me, but my African American friends and relatives as well. In a city that didn't feel safe, not because, definitely we had our issues, and our problems of, violence and drugs and poverty and all of that, but not feeling safe even, around police, around systems folks and all that, and even in school sometimes. Recall a situation walking to school, a National Guard tank on my corner of my house, and me and my friend, when he picked me up, as we walked off the porch, hearing a National Guard, cock the AK-47, and us tightening up and feeling that tightness, and not sure if we wanted to go to school because we didn't want to leave our home like that, and in school felt tight the whole day, and not until much later did I realize tightness, or inflammation, if you will, my body was the norm. You know, so grew up in that experience, and saw my parents struggle just to kind of create balance between the values they were trying to teach us, but then the street life that we had to become accustomed to in order to survive. And they struggled because we came home with some of that toxicity, and also some of those bad habits, or disrespectful values, and questioning them, and out of that, my brother ended up getting locked up and doing time. My sister was pregnant at like 16, and so a lot of upheaval, a lot of struggle within that, and I think that's what built a consciousness in me, of understanding trauma. People talk about being trauma informed. We've been trauma informed our whole life. We knew the trauma, we felt the trauma, we lived the trauma. It's just no one else cared about our trauma, and I'm not sure they still do now, but we live with that and know what to do with that, and that's why it's not coincidental that people of color, and especially people living in impoverished and stressed neighborhoods, have health issues. And now with COVID, the high rates of that black and brown people are dying or suffering or being sick is because for generations, we've had inflammation that has affected our hearts and our kidneys and our lungs and our well-being and our sleep and our ability to just to be present, and without the health care and without nutritional foods in our neighborhoods, and without mental health that really understands us and not locks us up or puts us away or deports us or takes away our children, it doesn't create a way for us to heal and for us to deal with the trauma. So that led me then to try and figure out, and now I realize that I was really trying to heal my own family when I went to school to become a psychologist. I really just wanted my family to heal, and I wanted to understand the wounds that I grew up with and was still carrying. Um, and unfortunately, in going to school. I mean, it did give me a degree, but Western society way of looking at life is very racist, very oppressive, very, um, misogynistic, very, very, just very punitive. And so they were teaching me to diagnose and analyze and look at people in a very judgmental way, but in a way that I could control their lives. So based on my report, I could tell a judge, these kids should not be with that mother. Based on my opinion and judging them without even understanding what they're going through, I could say this kid needs to be locked up. Or I can say person should be imported, they're a danger. I mean, I have all that power, and it really, really bothered me because that's not the way we were raised. We were raised not to judge people and to be compassionate for their life. And I remember even, walking to the store with my dad when I was a young boy and seeing this man called Mr. Joe. And Mr. Joe was right there outside the liquor store. I think he used to sleep there. I don't know. But when we passed by, my dad would say, "Good morning, Mr. Joe." And my dad would say, "Hello, Mr. Joe." "Hello, Mr. Joe." And my dad didn't call him the wino or the drunk or the homie. It's Mr. Joe, right? And I remember one day we were walking to the store, and I guess Mr. Joe had a hard night because his hair was sticking all up like that. And I started to laugh. And I was laughing. My dad, "What are you laughing at?" Look at Mr. Joe. Look at his hair. It's all sticking." My dad, "Hey, you don't be doing that. You don't be laughing at people. But look at Dad. You don't even know what he went through last night. You don't know. We could be like that someday. Don't you dare be like that." And I got scolded.
Beautiful.
So that was the opposite of what I was learning in my psychology classes, my clinical. So when I came out, I really had to detoxify, if you will, from that, because it wasn't. What I understood is then the system wasn't really about healing our folks. It wasn't about embracing. It was about controlling, even the helping profession, right? That way, and so. Anyway, that's a little bit about my life. I mean, obviously in that process too, I now have you know 3 children of my own, and then with my partner, she has 2 children. So we have 5 children together, and we have 6 grandchildren. And so I'm a proud grandfather of 6, and that really is the reason why I do everything. As part of this journey, there's been a lot of teachings and a lot of challenges that really have really guided the trajectory of my life, and growing up in that neighborhood and seeing the way people are treated, but then how that illness can then get into the people, and when society doesn't look at you in a good way and doesn't value you and makes you think that you're not worth anything, after you hear that message and that vibration goes on and you see it in the media and you see it in your school, then sometimes it gets integrated in your own body. And so what I saw in my own neighborhood is people that look like each other hurting each other and killing each other in gangs, and I saw it in our home with domestic violence, and I saw it, guys just shooting knives. I mean, and later on I understood it, but then it was just like, man, we're hurting each other. Why are we doing this? And as much as I was proud of my culture, when I became a therapist, it was like most of the clients I were getting were men that looked like me, and we were hurting our wives and hurting our children and hurting ourselves, and so that caused a big struggle and a big dilemma, because I love my people and I love my culture, but we were hurting ourselves. We were damaging our people. We were damaging our family, and what that caused me and a number of others to do is to say, we need healing for our people, not just treatment, not just intervention, not just the criminal justice system. And so we came together and we called some men together, because what we knew is the men were causing the harm. We were the ones that were hurting our partners and our children and each other and our communities. And so we called some men together to say, who wants to help build programs that would heal? And we came together. 19 men ended up showing up, and we, in our culture, in our ways, by then we had learned that some things are essential. In our cultural ways, you always start with prayer, and you always invite the ancestors to come in to help guide you regardless of what you're doing. And with that, we then invited people to share who they are, what their intentions were. Because it was 19 guys. We didn't know each other. Some guys didn't know each other, right?
What year was this?
That was in 1988. In 1988, 19 men came together in Jolon, California. And and uh, and after we began and opened with prayer and asked the ancestors to come guide us, then we did what we call a conocimiento, or an acknowledgement. Who are you and why are you here? And the second brother in began to share about, I'm a therapist, I want to help my people, and I want to do this, but I'm going to tell you what's really going on with me. And he said, I'm hurting myself. I don't know how to love my wife. I don't know how to love my kids. And even though I help other people, I drink too much, and then he said, I'm going to share something that he said, I was abused as a kid. I was sexually abused as a kid, and I said, I've never told anybody, and especially men. And he began to cry. And it was almost one of those spirit cries where you can't even talk, where you're like, and you could feel his spirit, right, opening up. You could say breaking, but it was opening up, something that he held for years. And when he released it, and when he began to cry like that, all of the rest of us began to cry.
Oh.
And it touched all, opened us all up. And by the time we finished doing that acknowledgement of who we were, what we realized, even though we were the therapists, we were the teachers, we were the advocates, we were the lawyers, we were supposedly the successful ones, the leaders, what we realized is that we were all wounded. And that we had bought the lie. And the lie was, as long as you get your education, get your degree, get your house, get your car, everything is fine and equal. What we didn't realize is that we had generations of trauma that had gone on with our people.
It's internalized.
Never dealt with it, and it was in our bodies. It was in our bodies, showing up in our liver and our kidneys, and we were coping in negative ways by drinking or working too much or getting high or womanizing, or all this stuff. And as we sat there in each other's presence, we realized the most revolutionary thing we could do was to first heal ourselves. That we had to heal the wounds of our fathers, of our grandfathers, our great-great-grandfathers that had been colonized and oppressed and conquered and made to believe these ways and took them into their families. We had to cleanse from all of those things. We had to let go. We had to weed out the toxicity, and we had to recover, uncover, discover the sacredness of who we really were. And that journey started in 1988, and out of that, Circulos de Hombres, the circle of men, we also made another commitment that we needed to bring other men into this healing path, make them accountable as well, because if they were doing harm, we needed to say it, say something or step up or do something, and that's been part of our legacy and our advocacy, for over 30 years. But then the next thing we had to do was we had to teach the next generation. And a lot of the work that I've done all these years has been that rites of passage for young men who don't have fathers, who have fathers that are wounded, or fathers that are deported, or fathers that are just as wounded as they are and don't know. And that's been the legacy of the work that we've done all these years, and we're still healing. We're still healing, because when you have 500 years of wounds, you don't heal overnight, But that became the beginning of what we now call the National Compadres Network, an organization that I helped co-found and are part of. And we, really our focus is healing communities generationally, from the elder to the elder to the young person, but also doing it, in all the directions. We have a strong women's division that really works on women and healing, and then youth, focus on youth as well, and then all those in between, all the gender identities. So we recognize that we all need healing, but that started on that path way a long time ago, building that consciousness, and now I look to my grandkids, and my the youngest one is, he's 3 months old, little boy, and really pretty dark-skinned boy, like his daddy. And first time I saw him, picked him up and said, "Thank you, Creator. Thank you, ancestors, for sending this special gift to us. And I held him in my arms, and even though I just met him, it's like I've known him for years. I said, welcome home, mijo, welcome home. We are your family. I'm your tata, I'm your grandpa. And I promise I'd make a commitment to you and the Creator and all everybody, that I will walk with you, that I will love you, that I'll feed you, that when you fall on the ground, I will fall there with you and pick you up. I'm not going to let you be alone. Teach you these ways, But I'm also going to make you accountable, because we need you to guide that next generation that way. And so, that's where I'm at right now, and learned a lot of lessons on the way, but still in that path to try and bring transformational healing to communities, of all ways, of all colors, of all races, but it came from that journey, and I really want to thank my ancestors who struggled and suffered and were enslaved and raped and all kinds of ugly things. We know the history, but didn't give up. And they kept praying, and they kept working, and they kept dreaming for us. And because of their legacy, we're able to be a little bit better, to love a little bit better, to heal a little bit better, to be a little bit better as a family, And that's what we're trying to do, one person at a time, one generation at a time. So.
I want to go back to the specifics of your work, but first I wanted to say that I grew up in LA, in West LA, and I never had a day of fear. I think mostly the scariest thing was someone in the neighborhood at a pool. We were going to sneak in at night to the pool. That was probably the scariest thing that ever I experienced. So in the same city, not that far apart, our experiences were totally different. It was assumed I was going to go to college. My parents went to college. So it totally, in the same area, such an opposite experience. It's really powerful to hear that.
Yeah, and I think, we all have our own journeys that way, that we take on. And, and even though there was a tough road, and there was some times in which, I was very afraid, and I still carry some of that in me,
Sure.
I still, because I saw, people killed, and you'd go to school and somebody wasn't there, they were deported, or now they were locked up, and so you never knew it was going to be there when you got home, and that's a residual fear that doesn't go away, because especially when it's still going on.
Yeah, it's like PTSD. It's really hard to get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, you can get rid of it if the harm stops, right? If the incidents like that are not going on, you can work on it and try, but when there's still this fear of, there's still this systemic inequity and the racism and
like
and all
Trump saying bad hombres come across from Mexico and rape women. I mean, that's traumatic.
Yeah. Well, and it is, but I think the other part is, not recognizing the worth that we are, that, from a really traditional indigenous point of view, this world will not be at peace or in balance until we recognize and acknowledge that all people and all their teachings and all their medicine is necessary for this world to be whole. And when you have a hierarchy of value, and when you say to my kids and my grandkids, in order for you to be successful, you have to now act this way and talk this way, and you have to give up certain of your ways, that's a destruction that is deep to the spirit. Because, I remember as a young kid, thinking that because my grandma had never gone to school or couldn't read or write, that she didn't know anything, that she was dumb, that I didn't need to listen to her, right? And what I realized through the years is my grandma was so wise. She was the spirit that really motivated us by her prayers at 4:30 in the morning. When every day she would say them prayers for all of us, and it didn't matter if we were good in school. She after she prayed, she'd come in our room and bless us all up, give us a blessing, right? And she blessed the ones that were good in school, the ones that were the stinky kids, the good-looking ones, the ugly ones. She didn't care. She blessed us all, and her message was that we're all blessings. Now, Now, to me, that was my saving grace. But if you look at my resume, my credential, it doesn't say my grandma's blessing as a significant element that got me to where I was. It didn't say my mother's unconditional love, you know. It didn't say that my father's hard work ethic and him working in spite of the racism, and none of that is acknowledged, right? But it's part of my experience, and it's part of my story, and it's part of what what now, I give thanks for those teachings. I give thanks for those lessons. I give thanks for those experiences. The choice, that I had, and that was really guided by so many people, is what do I do with those things? Do I sit on them? Do I hold them? Do I use them as a shield? Or do I heal from them and then use them as medicine? And that's what we were tempted to do. That's what I attempt to do, but I also share with people, you have a choice here. You have a choice. Do you transform the wounds, or do you just sit in them and drown in them? And I think that's what we're talking about, in terms of that, services, healthcare, mental health care, but in the traditional sense is that, we don't offer that to people. We force them to do certain things, and if they don't, then we're going to punish them or whatever. True healing is really a journey, and how do we provide those resources and those opportunities for people of all persuasions, that way. And I know as a young boy, I didn't feel I could reach out. I didn't even feel I should share my feelings.
What about your abuela or your madre?
Yeah. Well, she blessed me up anyway. But I'm talking about in the neighborhood when I'm out there. You weren't supposed to cry. You weren't supposed to express feelings, right? And so and I understand why. Because if you do that, you're very vulnerable in the neighborhood, right? But nobody told me that I could switch. That if you're in danger, you front up and you act bad. But when you walk in your house, you take that shield down. And, nobody told me how to do that, right? And those are the kind of things that's what healing is about. That still today, I got to tighten up, I got to front up, I got to act a certain way in certain places,
I think that's true for all men, don't you?
Well, I think it's not true for men; it's true for women too. I think it's true for all people.
Well, because women have a variety of emotions that are available to us. It's fine to cry, and no one said don't be like a boy, don't be a sissy, a crybaby. No one said those things to us.
Yeah, I think and this is a larger conversation, but I think as we are learning, the gender expansiveness of so many people is that there are masculine things and feminine things, and all of us struggle with an aspect of each of those, right? And I think that at the same time, a lot of my work is with women. I've had work with women that have been abused or sexually abused or raped, and to understand the pain, to understand that pain, and understand I've come to understand because I have daughters and I have sisters, I have my companion and everything, and and listening and understanding that the trauma that women go through, that when they walk sometimes down the street or walk in a room and they don't feel safe either, and they don't feel like they can say anything, and if they do, then they get challenged. So there's a lot of fear all around, and with disenfranchised population, and we're seeing it going on throughout this country where the rights of women are getting taken away, that your voice and your body is getting questioned. And I think that we as men need to step up, and support, the women and support the feminine, in this world, because that's where the healing comes from.
I want to go back to the very beginning. What month and year were you born?
December 1952.
So December, are you a Sagittarian?
I'm a Sagittarian, sure am.
See, that's so interesting to me because I did a book about visionary scientists, and Sagittarians were the biggest group because they're really forward thinking, ask deep questions. It's a sign that kind of promulgates leadership and profound thinking. So you're an example of that. And then I wanted to ask you about education because I think of like Julian Nava, who ended up at Harvard, I think. But when he was in school in LA, his counselors told him, "Oh, you should take shop classes. You can't take college prep classes." So I wondered what you experienced in terms of your schools. I know you went to private high school. Why was that?
Well, you asked me a couple of questions there, but one is that we grew up in a neighborhood where my mom felt it was safer for me to go to private school. And the other part is the religious part. My mom was Catholic, and she felt that she wanted that part of, and you mentioned education. In Spanish, there's something called la educación, right? Which doesn't mean formal education. It means the development of your character, your spirit. So my mom was really concerned about making sure that I was taught values, and I was, really taught about character and all of that as well. So that's why we went to Catholic school. And I went to a Catholic school in Watts called Verbum Day High School. The majority of the school was African American, and there was a small group of Mexican in the school. And in that school, even though it was right in the middle of Watts, right in the middle of where the Watts riots and everything happened, um, there was a really strong, because we were all black and brown boys. It was a male school. There was a really strong component of you guys need to succeed. You guys need to get ahead. So I didn't hear that negativity that I couldn't do that. I was taught, that you need to do this. You need to do this for your people. Now, I didn't know how to do it, and they didn't necessarily teach me how to do it, especially navigate they taught me about education, right? You need to take this class and take this class and do this, and, but they didn't, that wasn't the problem. The problem of the youngsters in that school was not the education, it was what went on outside of the institution, what went on in the neighborhood, what went on in society. Because many of my friends, didn't do well in school because there was so much trauma going on in the community or in their home or in their neighborhood, right? Um, and especially around the time that I was going to high school, right when the civil rights movement was happening and all of that, you know, um, there was a lot of strife that was going on in our community, and that's what takes your focus away. That's what makes it difficult for you to learn and to study and to retain and to do well. What really helped me as well is that in that school there was a group of Mexican. I mean, there were actually Mexican immigrant young men that were there, and they were there. They all played soccer, right? And and they didn't have enough soccer players that recruited me, right? And and I didn't know how to play soccer that well, but they brought me on the team and taught me and really embraced me from a cultural standpoint. They called me hermano, brother, you know, and at that age, my father had already died. He had died when I was 13, so when I got to high school, my dad had already passed away. Um, and they became like older brothers, you know. And we realize is that young men need other young men, you know. Now, what I saw in my neighborhood is other young men that were needing that went with young men that were getting hired,
They went in
drinking,
gangs, or they got
smoking dope, in gangs, all of that stuff. So they got indoctrinated into a different number of lessons. But we wanted to play soccer, and we wanted to win, and we wanted to have a good time. And so I felt that in spite of everything I went through in the neighborhood that I grew in, that the ancestors really helped me out by sending some people around me to affirm who I was. Now I had to do the work, and I had to deal with what was going on in my home and my neighborhood and all that. But at least I had a safe place, at least for a few hours. There are many of my peers and folks that never had a safe place, never, right? So I think that that was, but that consciousness was really a foundational element of my life
How
to
many
today.
how many siblings do you have?
Um, there's six of us all together.
And how many went to university?
Um, my other older brother than me he went on to law school actually. Um, so the other ones didn't, but we did. So he became a lawyer. Yeah.
So the reason that you and your brother went to college and the others didn't is because you had a support group that encouraged you to study and go on?
Well, no. I think there's a lot of dynamics in terms of when and age. My brother's 8 years older than me. The next brother's a year older than him, and that brother that was a year older than him, my brother George, really, I call him, kind of the warrior in our family, the gatekeeper. He took a lot of the wounds. He, really struggled a lot, and because of that, he shielded my brother a year older. So he was the kind of the rebel rouser. He would fight everybody if they messed with us. He would be, he was the one that protected and all of that, and because of that, he got a lot of the wounds. He was also darker than my other brother, and that doesn't seem like a really big thing unless you live in racist society. That my brother George, my brother John, and George is the darker one, and John is the lighter one, and John could be driving, and George in the passenger seat. The cops would stop, and they go over to George and begin questioning him. So, I mean, we don't think skin color, it sure does.
You bet.
And perception and bias and all of that. So, and I think, also how you deal with your pain, because my brother had to defend and being one of the oldest and having to make the way, then you become a defender and a fighter. And in this society, that's not seen as a good thing. So, and my other brother was, was a little bit more laid back, liked to read, and that kind of insulated him a little bit. And of course he had some perseverance and got him to, to go on to school and go to college and become a lawyer, And I think that became, I then had choices about how to, which one in the family do I, and I think the other part is, to be honest, is the ancestors' prayers. I think, just the prayers of my grandma and, my mom and, the hard work. I went to college, not because I wanted to be successful or get ahead. I went to college to make my mom proud because I saw how hard she worked. And I saw how much she wanted me to do that. And I saw, so that's why I went to college. And I didn't like college. I didn't like school at all.
Where'd you go? What college?
Well, that's a whole other story. Well, no, I got a scholarship to Claremont Men's College.
Oh, wow, that's a good college.
And I got a full ride. I got a full scholarship with room and board, books, everything. It was a little stipend once a month, and I went there for 1 year. And then I got drafted. The Vietnam draft was going on, and I got drafted. My number in the lottery was number 1.
I thought they were supposed to draft students.
Well, so that's the next part of the story. So I then went to my counselor and says, well, put in for a deferment. I put in for a deferment. They turned me down, right? I put in again. They turned me down. Ended up, the time came I had to go. Later on, I researched it, and they turned down black and brown students 10 times as much as they did whites. So we ended up in Nam. We ended up in the front lines. I ended up in the military, which I didn't want to go. But my mom said, "Mijo, tú eres un hombre y tienes que ir. You're a man, you need to go. You need to defend your country." So I was like, "Mom, I'm in school. Well, escuela, that's good, but, you need to be a man." I mean, that's my mom's real traditional point of view, loyalty and, the patriotism too. And, I served my time and came out, and my scholarship was gone. So I had to go to a local college. I went into Dominguez Hills, which was just starting at that time. Cal State Dominguez Hill. There's still a bunch of dirt all around it, just some classrooms, and I went there and got my bachelor's there, and then I went on to Loyola and got my master's in clinical psych. So.
Ashanti Branch in Oakland taught math in high school and now has a program you may have heard for boys of color. And he said in his experience there, at least in the Bay, it's not cool to get good grades if you're a boy who's brown or black. Girls, it's okay, but not boys. You have to know a lot about sports, but not school. That's considered, I guess, unmasculine. Does that ring a bell, or is that not what you've seen?
Yeah, no. I see, and part of that comes from this indoctrination of who is smart, and when you see in your history books and you see that indoctrination of who are the successful people, who are the inventors, who are the people in our history that did all this stuff, and they don't look like you, right? Who are the smart people, and then you hear the negative narrative about who we are, and we're criminals and gang members and drug dealers and all this other stuff, and you see that in the media, and you see it all over the place, and then you begin to get a perception of, okay, in order to be smart, and what went on in my neighborhood is when you acted really smart, it said, stop acting white.
Yeah, right.
So it was like, okay, am I in with my friends or am I not? But there's another cultural part to this that really this educational system sets us up, because education is about competition, and it's about being the smartest and the best, right? That's what you strive for. In my cultural sense, it wasn't about being the best. It wasn't about being the smartest. In fact, I remember one time I was playing with my cousins, and we were bragging, I'm faster than you, and I can do this, and I can beat him. My cousin, no, you're not. I'm better than you. And my dad walked by, and he looked at me and says, hey, stop that. You're not better than nobody. And I'm saying, dang, that's messed up. And then as he was walking away, he says, but you're just as good as anybody. I'm like, what? Wait a minute. I'm not better than nobody, but what does that mean, And I didn't understand the duality of that message till later on, when I began understanding from an indigenous cultural point of view that we're not striving to be better. We're striving collectively, to contribute in a good way. Everyone has something to contribute. And your medicine is not better than mine. It's just a different medicine. And you're not more important because you graduated from high school than the elderly woman that's walking on. No, just different teachings, right? And so you go to school and say, okay, be better and be smarter and show that you're better. And when you do that, then your friends get mad at you. Man, why you got to act like that? And it's not so much that we don't think we're smart. It's because, why are you making me feel bad? Why are you making me feel like you're better than me? See, now, if you grow up with options, have a nice house, have a car, can go do things, can buy different things, all of that, then that's just one thing. But if you grow up all the time, society and media and school and history saying you're not good, you're not smart, you're not anything, and then one of your friends acts like that, it triggers a whole bunch of stuff, right? Why are you gonna act? You get out of here. I don't want to play with you no more. You go ahead, smarty, get out of here, right? And it's not about you don't want your friend to be smart. It's that, man, somebody else is making me feel, that I'm not smart, right? And especially in schools where, the teachers aren't paid as well, or we don't have the newest equipment. We don't have when I went to college, I didn't know how to type. And Claremont College, mainly, I was on scholarship. Most people were not on scholarship. They had a bunch of money. Guys walked in back there with typewriters, right? And not only that, they had money to pay somebody to write their papers.
That's not good.
And I'm sitting there trying to do my, one finger at a time, trying to type a paper, and so those inequities catch up with you, right? But early on as a kid, you begin getting these perceptions of who is smart and how do you become smart, and those are when those things begin coming out, and you thinking you're not smart, and even many professionals, today, people of color, there's this thing called the Imposter Syndrome, right? Where you're doing well, but the big fear is, are they going to know? Are they going to find out that really, and it's like, find out what? But when that's ingrained in you, and you grow up in a society that's very, paternalistic, and you believe you gave me that credential, you gave me that degree, you gave me that privilege, meaning the people in charge, they can take it away in a second, right? And we see this all the time, right? So that's why it's important for us to change the narrative, change the whole ideology of what this looks like, and recognize that, you know what? My people are brilliant, but your people are brilliant too, right? And part of that is recognizing that from our historical context, my people invented things, built pyramids, concept of zero, agricultural farming. We feed the world with the hands and the struggle of my people, right? And we have a genetic memory and traditions and customs that build spirit and build faith and build interconnectedness. So, but it took me a lot of years. And so even sharing this with young people that are going through their rites of passage, we recognize I'm sharing this, but the world is sharing something else, right? And so what my teachings and what we share, not just me, but there's a whole group of us across the country, that we're sharing a counter narrative that sometimes gets challenged by the greater society and the system.
Yeah, and people thought when Obama was elected we were kind of a post-racist society, but then Trump showed us, oh no, there's a big underbelly of racism, and all the anti-Latino things he said just showed how active it still was. It wasn't a post-racial society at all.
Well, I think the what we recognize is that we are a society that's very wounded, and we have been wounded since the inception. And the first step of healing is acknowledgement of truth. So if I'm an alcoholic, first step of my healing is I have to acknowledge, what, I drink too much. I have a problem with this. If I don't acknowledge that, I can't heal, right? And so the acknowledgement of who I am, not with judgment, I have to say you're bad because of that. You have to be ashamed, but just say, hey, you're right. And I'll tell you, for a long time, my dad had that issue, and for a long time I would deny it. No, my dad, he just drinks a few, but no, my dad had an addiction, right? But in order for me to heal, I had to acknowledge that without shame anymore. That's just who my dad was. That's the way he coped. That's the way he dealt with it. Whether it was good or bad, that's who my dad was, right? In the same way in this society, if we don't acknowledge the truth of what went on and what's still going on, there's no way we can heal. So I don't care. You can put any president you want in there. You can shift people and give more opportunity. If we don't acknowledge the truth and begin then to undo some of the policies and procedures and perceptions that came out of that, and begin then to co-create a new way, right, in which now we begin to integrate the value of all people and the power of all people as well, then we'll never heal. And so that's part of that journey.
There's such a big movement in the southern states and wherever right-wing conservatives have power to tell schools they can't discuss systematic racism. And that, to me, it's like, I kind of had a naive view that, things progress, but actually we've gone backwards in a lot of ways.
Well, I think things have been the way they've been. It's just that we pretended they weren't and wanted them to be different, and we're hoping them to be different. And I think what happens sometimes is wounds just get hidden underground. They just get hidden. Right?
Yeah,
they're still there.
Yeah,
right. And what I think the last 4 years did is they said, bring them out.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
You saw them, raw right there.
But that can be healing, as you say, to bring it to the light and to consciousness. That can be healing.
Yeah, I think we're in that journey to figure out how to do that, because I think that there's still a lot of woundedness there, and I think that people are talking about critical race theory and all those things and how those are important, and then people are pushing back on that because anytime you mention race, it's a triggering point in this society. And because of the wound, because the
and
historical
especially because whites are becoming a minority, that really triggers it.
Yeah, I think that's one reality. But let's be really clear: you can put other people that look like people of color, and they can take on the very same values, the very same perceptions. So
it's called
in our community. We clamored for more African American and Latino police officers, right? And because we protested and because we demanded it, we got more Latino and African American police officers. But what we didn't understand at the time is they still went through the same training and indoctrination that others did, right? So by the time they got to the end of the training, now they had all the same biases, the same perceptions, the same procedures as white officers. So, what did we do? Okay, now we have people that look like you, and sometimes treat you worse, right? So it's not as simple as just saying, let's put somebody that looks like somebody. When you're teaching, when a system has an ideology and a pedagogy that is still, very inequitable, that is still very oppressive, that's still very negating, very traumatic, and very harmful.
What I don't understand is that in Texas there's about as many Anglos as Latinos. In California, there's more Latinos than Anglos. So why do we have a Governor Abbott? Why do we have the recall fairly close in California? Why did a fair amount of Latinos vote for Trump? I don't understand that.
Well, and I'll throw back the example. There's more women in this world than there are men. More women but yet we get legislation that passed that's very much anti-women, right? That you have more women, but yet you have women making less money, and the inequality and the inequity and the sexual assault, all that stuff that goes. There's not enough resources, So it you would think numbers, really dictate things, but it's really power. And it's really the power structure, right? And it's really a mentality. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, unless we transform that, then we can get more, people of color in all kinds of systems. But if they're running the same system, if they're still teaching the same, view, I mean, does it matter? I guess it does to some extent. If a African American or Latino or white person says, I'm no good, you are no good because of your race or your color and all of that, whether they say it directly or indirectly. I mean, regardless of who that comes from, it's painful, it's devastating, it's traumatic, right? And it may not come across that directly, but the way that it does come across is I don't see myself in history books in a positive way. I don't see the truth about what went on to my people. Nobody explains to me, the historical trauma that my people have gone through, and out of that have built these traumatic processes to cope with them that sometimes hurt their own families, right? So when we're not taught that, then we think we're just bad. We're not as good. We're not as smart.
How does that explain voting for Trump or Abbott?
Well, because then there's a whole process that you go on to identify with the oppressor. So you begin identifying with the oppressor, right? And so now let's say you're in a college, right? And you want to be tenured. You want to be tenured because that gives you retirement, gives you everything. But you know that certain things are going on there that are unfair, that are racist, that are inequitable. But if you say it, you're not going to get tenured. And so who you hang out with even. So you want to get tenured, you go hang out with a tenured, which are mostly white. And now you begin, they have the power, right? They're part of the committees. I'm just giving one example.
Yeah.
This goes on all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And now you're tenured. And now you're tenured. You think you can say more, but now, no. And so an indoctrination process goes on, and you have to choose, right? You have to choose. And after a while, you begin believing, because now you want to maintain the status quo. And so it is not, it historically, because we live in a society that indoctrinates us to have a hierarchy of value for certain people, right? And so certain people are seen as more intelligent, as more progressive, as more, more successful, all of those things, right? And other people are not. And when you continue to hear those messages over and over again, then you begin to believe them. You also learn that in order to be successful, you have to do certain things. And you begin then acting, walking, talking. And what that means, sometimes you have to give up who you are. You got to begin associating. Go play golf and hang out with these folks. No, I want to listen to my homies over here. And, no, you do that. You're not, you got to spend more time, There's all these subtle things that I've experienced and I continue to experience. And then you become a professional like me. Now, if you look at my history, you look at me, I'm a award-winning author, right? I've have a number of books. I have a whole series of children's books. I've been awarded awards by presidents, by governors of California. I speak to thousands and thousands, a large keynote present, 10,000 people. And I'm traveling across country before COVID a number of years ago. I have a comfortable shirt on, and I walk in. I'm speaking, doing the keynote that evening at this large conference. But I walk in the room right after lunch because I want to see the room just to kind of get an idea in my head to prepare. And I walk in the room and they're having lunch. And as I'm standing there, two women turn around and say to me, "Can you give me some more coffee?" You know, and let me just say something. You know, I'm not opposed to getting people coffee, and I really respect those people that serve others. But these ladies look at me and all they can see, right? And so what goes on in me is the reverberation of all those times that not only did I get treated that way, but when I saw my dad treated that way, saw my mom treated that way, saw Miss Mosley treated that way, saw Tyrone father treated. I mean, all of those experiences that are still in my body. When that went on with me, I like, you know, and in a second I went like, shit, I'm gonna kick somebody's ass. You know, I was back in the neighborhood because I wanted to retaliate. And of course, you know, I had to breathe and I learned how to deal with those traumatic reactions. And then I brought some of my daddy with me. And I looked at the name tags of these ladies, these two ladies, and I put them in my mind. And then when I went to speak the keynote in the evening, of course, they read off all the credentials and everything. And I said, you know, thank you for the introduction. And I want to just begin by acknowledging two women that greeted me when I got here today. And I called their names and I asked them to stand up. I said, please give them a round of applause. They greeted me very graciously when I came here. And that's my dad. My dad is a jokester. Right? And, you know, but the reason I was able to do that is because I've done years of healing. And because I recognize who I really am. That it doesn't take these women to validate me. Right? That's years of healing. But it doesn't mean it still didn't impact me.
Right.
And it still didn't mean that it wasn't right for them to do that. It wasn't. It was very disrespectful.
Right.
But that goes on every day. So the point that I'm making is that it's not, you know, talking about race and culture and inequity and racism is not about making anybody feel bad. It's about dealing with the reality. And it's really about the health of this country. Because when you don't deal with something that's a wound, it continues to ferment and gets worse and worse, and then turns to anger, then turns to hate. And we're seeing that all across this country. I mean, you know, and because of COVID and this pandemic, it's really isolated people where they don't have avenues to express and release and get out. And so you're seeing a tremendous amount of mental health issues, and especially in children, right? That they have not had the support to be able to heal or even to cope, right? But you see it in adults as well, and you see it in families, you see it in relationships. So, but this is something that we, as people of color, have been struggling with all our lives. Sheltering in place is nothing new for us. We've had to shelter in place a lot. No, the cops are around, immigrating. We've had to shelter. We've had to shelter. We want to go into some place and we see people there. No, stay in the car. We've had to shelter all along. This is not a new thing for us, right? But it's, you know, again, learning from those experiences and recognizing that certain people are going to deny by using, you know, the individual example. And the individual example, well, you talk about all that stuff in that neighborhood, but look at this one kid that made it. That kid made, you know, you use your individual example for a collective harm, right? And of course there's individuals. Obama got through, right? But what did it take for him to get through? And when he got there, he got blasted. You know, some people just saw him as a black man. And because of that, they would not go along. I mean, we're talking about, you know, politically minded people because he was that. they would not go along with that and not even consider he may have be proposing something or suggesting something that's good for their own constituents. No, he's just a black man, right? And they were locked in that, and because of that, that became then a fight, and that fermented. See, we were in a country that says, well, yeah, we understand diversity and all that, of course, but you know what? We're still in power. We're still in power, so I ain't got to worry. Now you see an African American man coming, it's like, oh, wait a minute, something's going on here, right? And it brings up all the insecurities. And that then you follow with somebody like Trump that gives you then license to say all of those things, all of your wounds, put them out, and we end up, where we're at,
Right. Is it a stereotype, or is there some truth to that a value in Latino culture is machismo and Marianismo? How active is that still?
Well, let me just say that all populations are very diverse. So when you mention Latino population, who are you talking about? Who are we talking about? Because we recognize that we have Mexicano and Central American and South American and
Puerto Rican.
we have all kinds of different populations and a lot of the people that are coming to the United States these days are indigenous people. They're from Oaxaca. They're from Guerrero. They speak their indigenous language, right? So they're really native, right? So when you talk about all that, now let's talk about machismo, because that's something we've had to deal with all my life, and what we don't realize is that the sense of being macho is really has to do with being an honorable man. And the sense of the true macho, the true honorable man, is one that honors women, is responsible, is a person of their word, is compassionate, is sensitive. There's 12 principles, right? Now, you would never know that. And a lot of our families and men don't know that definition, because what's been taught to them is the other one, right? The wounded sense of macho, the traumatic sense of macho, which is being basically, and it's not even Latino or Mexican, it's patriarchy. It's what patriarchy is. See? And so we recognize that all men have elements of that, right? We all have that indoctrination at one point or another. Living in this society, you have to decide, because the whole sense of control, whole sense of superiority, whole sense of thinking that you're smarter, that you're stronger, that you can be sexual with anybody, all of those things, right? And by the way, domestic violence is not any higher in Latino culture than it is in white culture. The one marker is usually disconnection. Poverty can contribute to that, but poor whites as much domestic violence as poor blacks or poor Latinos, right? But then there's a whole other aspect of abuse with middle class and upper class populations, which is very high as well. So if we really begin to understand the data and the statistics, there's no more patriarchal, misogynistic, negative, wounded behavior from one culture to the other, right? Now, what we end up seeing many times is more people that are in the criminal justice system, in the mental health system, because of poverty, because of those contracted issues, right? So when we talk about, when I talk about, the true sense of being an honorable man, we talk about sacred manhood. And sacred manhood, right, is the element of those values that I was telling you about, right? Of recognizing that sacred manhood allows you to have elements of masculine in you. You need the masculinity, but you also have femininity in you too. You need to be nurturing. You need to be compassionate, right? But you also have the child spirit in you. You need to be able to laugh and play and act goofy and silly and just be, but you need to have the elder in you too. You need to be wise. And so when we talk about from an indigenous aspect, sacred manhood is having all of those, and the healed aspect of that sacred manhood is the flexibility to move where you need to. So sometimes I need the feminine in me. Sometimes I need to be a nurturing grandpa, or a husband or a father. Sometimes, there's an earthquake that happens and I get scared and I need to bring that masculine out and say, no, it's going to be okay. I'm lying, but it's going to be okay, kids. It's fine, And I need to shield and I need to pretend like it's okay. And I need to be courageous. And if somebody's trying to harm my family, I better step up and I better step up aggressively. Sometimes you need that. And then sometimes I need to be like a kid. I just need to be a kid, and sometimes I need to be wise. So the true essence in our indigenous culture is that sacred man. Unfortunately, when you're indoctrinated that who you are is that wounded man, the wounded macho, and you begin to believe that's who you are, you have two choices. Either you act like that and reinforce those teachings, and the kids generation after generation learns that, or in this society, makes you believe, well, you can't be that. So don't be that, and now be like Western society, which means you have to give up your culture. That's what you think. And what we say, no, you don't have to do either. You have to reground yourself in the sacredness of who you really are. And we say that to men that we work with that have issues with violence, with drugs, with alcohol, but we all say it for young boys too. I'm not saying you can't be hard, dude, and you can't, protect yourself. But know when to take that mad dog hat off. When you walk in your mom's house, don't be talking like, don't be acting like that. Take that down, be respectful. Put the respectful at. That's the flexibility. I know when you go in the neighborhood and some dudes want to fight, you're going to need to step up. Ooh, you're going to need to step up like that. You need to have that. In this society, you need to sometimes be hard. You need to sometimes not cry. But when somebody's hurting, man, and you feeling it, let it go. Let them tears roll. Let it go, And so it's that aspect that we're talking about, healing that wounded man that's been going on for generations, right? And that's the work really that we do, right? Trying to transform. And this is not only the case for males, it's a case for females too, for women as well.
What
And
about
now we have gender expansive populations that, the transgender and all that. So we need to consider it's not just, binary. There's really a whole spectrum of how we're looking at this.
The Marianismo aspect of it meant that women should be protected. You should have a chaperone if you go on a date before you're married. You should be pure like Mary, a virgin. Mm-hmm. And then the other part of that, I think, is the quinceanera that says, okay, you're 15 now, you're eligible for marriage. Just say a word about those messages to Chicanas.
Well, again, I grew up with strong women. So my mother didn't play. My sister would kick my brother's butt. I mean, I grew up with strong women, right? The stereotype is that Latina women are submissive, and no, not in my neighborhood. I grew up with strong women, right? So there's a stereotype about that, and one of the reasons is if you look historically when the conquistadores came, right? They were looking to destroy the strongest so that they could conquer. So what would happen is the men would come out to defend, right? And the women would stay behind because we recognize that the center of all of our families and our cultures are women. Women are the center. We're matrilineal. They are the center. They have the wisdom. They give life. They're the nurturers. They're the healers. We do not survive without the women, right? And the women, of course, protect the children. Women will do anything to protect her children, right? But we as men realize, that's why we went to war, that's why we went, and not that you didn't have women warriors, you had women warriors too, right? But the aspect then, when you have lived as men with a lot of trauma and torture, where you've seen things go on that are you see people shot and stabbed and killed and raped and all of that, it begins to penetrate. And I remember my dad, not wanting any of us to go out, but especially my sisters, because the thought of what could happen to them, And so now I've become a dad. I'm all woke and I'm real contemporary and of course open and everything. But I have a son and I have a daughter. And I have a son and even though I said, okay, yeah, the equity and all of that, and my son gets 14 and he can go and stay over his friend's house. Then my daughter says, can I go and stay? Well, and I feel my body tighten up and I get afraid, because I've seen girls raped, I've heard about that, and I've seen girls that have come crying to me because it's happened to them, and I know that the woundedness of communities is out there, and there are some men and boys that are just like that. And I have a 14-year-old daughter, and my fear comes out, and I have to deal with that, and it's reality, and I intellectually understand what I want to do, but what is really my role? And my daughter said, "Dad, don't worry about it. I'm cool. It's all right." My friends, I said, "But yeah, but why are you worried, oh, mija?" And I, because I wasn't really in touch with really what was going on with me. It's real easy to remember, well, that's the rule, and you can't go. Well, how come Marcos got you? Well, that's different. What's different? And my daughter really challenged me that way. So I think the fear that's based in reality sometimes gets in there, right? And if we don't talk about it and deal with it as a family, then we end up doing things like, no, you got to stay here, you can't do that.
So did you give your daughter a quinceañera?
No, we didn't. But we did a ceremony. We did do a ceremony. See, and what you don't understand is the quinceañera is the celebration. It's not the ceremony. In indigenous culture, there was a ceremony for boys and girls.
Oh.
Right? And the ceremony was more the preparation for their next stage of life.
For adulthood.
Well, for the next stage of life. Yeah. Because you have childhood, then you have that adolescence, that next stage of life that prepared you for adulthood.
Oh,
right?
I see.
And when girls got her menses and it was time, we need to prepare. The women, you need to have a council of women that are around you, that guide you. Here are your aunties, right? You can go to them, resources. We understood that just your mom alone can't guide you. She doesn't have all the teachings and lessons, and you're closer to that younger one that's 2 years older than you, that's your aunt, and she takes you to the mall, and she does things, and when you're upset, you're not going to talk to your mom, but you may talk to her. So there becomes, that was the true ceremony, and then there's teachings around life and around preparation and all of that. But the true aspect of announcing that she was this age is saying to the community, you must respect her. She's not a little girl anymore. You must respect her as a woman, right? And that got twisted all around. When the conquistadores came in, they took away all of our ceremonies, our drums, our dance, all the things that built our spirit and our character. Said, but you can party if you want. You can go ahead and party. In fact, I'll give you some beer, and we see that going on today, right? We'll fund, Coors will fund, and Budweiser will fund all these events, and so we end up, with all this alcohol so available in our. Why is it in poor communities? There's a liquor store in every corner, right? You go to a rich neighborhood, the ordinance says a liquor store only every 3 miles. Why is there a different ordinance in poor neighborhoods than in rich neighborhoods? And we know that part of addiction is access. You have more access. So there's all these historical things. The same thing with boys. We did a ceremony for my boy too. When he got 13, we brought the family there. I prepared him. We prepared him. Brought some uncles around. He had to speak. And the first thing he had to speak is he had to give thanks to his grandparents, to his godparents, to all the people that have helped him that far, right? And then I put my son right in the middle of that circle. There must have been 100 people there. And look around you. Look around you. Look at all these people that love you and care for you. You'll never be alone. You always have somebody as long as you reach out. I said, now look around. Look around you. I want you to recognize that anything you do will affect them all, good or bad. Be careful how you walk now. You're not a little boy. And that becomes then the responsibility, Legs. Now, that's the traditional way, right? Now, unfortunately, when they take away your traditions and your values and your customs, then you learn the way of society. Hey, man, you're 15 here. Have a shot, smoke some blood, It becomes a whole different thing, right? And then you learn the negative things. Or you have a dad take his son to Tijuana with a prostitute. The negative things. Thinking that that's going to be healthy for his development and intimacy and sexual knowledge. It's traumatizing.
It is traumatizing. Let's talk about the specifics and how you have institutionalized some of these values. So Cultura Cura 40 years ago, right. that was the group of men that started everything. And
no, the Circulo de Hombres, the Circle of Men, we started that 33 years ago, and then out of that developed an organization called the National Compadres Network. La Cultura Cura is the philosophy, is the indigenous philosophy that then becomes the ideology for all the thinking, for all the concepts, for the values, for the traditions, for the rites of passage, for the teachings, for the curriculum that we've developed. Now, we've developed curriculum to teach other people to work with young men, for fatherhood, for men returning from prison, for doing healing circles, for doing all this work, for working in schools. We have curriculum that's related to all of those things. And we work collaboratively with our other groups, Brotherhood of Elders in Oakland with the African American population. We have a whole effort it's about bringing together these wisdom keepers of healing practitioners from every culture all across the country. And we're now building a network of healing practitioners across the country, because what we've realized, especially when George Floyd happened and then COVID happened, that there's a lot of people that need support, a lot of people that need healing. And so we're in the process of building that capacity in communities. And all of this comes out of that whole aspect to heal, and the sense of La Cultura Cura, which means culture heals.
What's in a specific, like, let's say a boy comes to you who's 16 and anxious and depressed and feels unaccepted by his peers, and what's an example of a healing ritual that would help him find his center?
We give him pizza. That's right there. That's what helps. Pizza. Well, I mean, to be real practical, we do give food.
Yeah, that's the best tool for organizing, for sure.
Well, food, yeah, and what that does is, if you do it in a good way, it says welcome. We will feed you. We will take care of you, right? Yeah. But the most important thing is that first step of acknowledging someone as a blessing. So we have a staff member, Ozzy Cruz. He was 15 when we met him, and he was on probation, hanging out, with the gangs and all of that, and that's why he was on probation. And at 15, he'd become a teen father. And part of his probationary requirement was he go to a fatherhood class. And we were running a teen fatherhood group that was based on all these teachings. And he showed up. Probation officer sent him there. He didn't really want to go, but in order to deal with probation, he went. And Ozzy will share the story that when he got there, we were there, and one of the men who was running the program, Bobby Verdugo, welcomed him and says, "Welcome, mijo." And mijo means my son.
I know, yeah.
Welcome, mijo. And Ozzy will say that's the first time he ever heard a grown man call him son. Wow. And all the men called him mijo. We all said, "My son," And without realizing the impact of finally getting a grown man to treat you in a loving way, in an embracing way, in spite of all your wounds, in spite of the stuff that you've done, in spite of, you still call me mijo, you still love me, you still will care for me, yeah. And so Ozzy went through the 12 sessions of the program, and about learning about fatherhood, but really about learning about, first of all, manhood, and learning about himself, right? Because he didn't have anybody to teach him that. And after he finished, we graduated him, and he says, "Hey, can I come for another round, another session?" And I said, "We don't get paid for you to come for another one. We only got paid for one." And, "Well, I'll volunteer." So he came back for another one. He came back for a whole other round and finished that. And then I said, "Can I do it again, too? What's going on? You eat too much pizza here, So we had to hire him. And Ozzy's been, connected with us for like 20 years. He's our senior training specialist. He trains all across the country. He's an amazing father. He's an amazing grandfather, husband. He's one of the most powerful teachers that we have. But it starts with you acknowledging somebody as a blessing, you welcoming them in, you embracing them and saying, I will walk with you. And that greeting, that ceremony, because it is a ceremony. It is saying, welcome home, you go.
It
And
seems
you
to me
begin a journey.
the core of the like Every Man and the Mankind Project and Ashanti Branches program is that they all provide a circle of men that hold you accountable, care about you, focus on you, give you undivided attention, and so that allows the man to really develop in a way he can't in a circle of women where he may feel he has to have performance anxiety or something. There's something about being in a circle of your same gender that's strengthening.
Well, I think, yeah, I think all of those things are true. But um, the men that are there have to have gone through their process. Because you can have a circle of men that are not giving good teachings. You can have a circle of men that are very misogynistic, a circle of men that are very kind of street and hard and fool, you need to get yourself in place, and we've seen that too. It's not about that. It's about that you have to have men that have gone through that have gone through and are going through their own process, that have chosen certain ways of being that are honorable. Because I've seen, I do evaluation programs all across the country, programs that are working with boys, but the guys that are teaching are still out there doing some of the same stuff. They're still being very misogynistic. They're still drinking. They're still getting high. They're still, not being responsible. So it's not just about having a group of men. It's about having a group of men that are rooted in some values, that's some character. But the other part that is essential, especially to boys of color, is getting reacquainted with your culture, with your identity, and learning to love yourself, and being able to separate the oppressive ways that you see in your family, that you see in the community, from your sacred ways. Being able to separate those, right? To understand that those ways are not really who you are. It may be what you've adopted to survive, but those are not the healthy ways. And we need to learn how to heal you from those so you're walking more on that sacred manhood side. And so, yeah, there's a lot of manhood programs that I've seen come and go, and they do great work. But if you want it to be sustainable, you got to deal with the root, and that's culture, and that's identity, and the opposite of that is racism and oppression. You got to deal with all of that, because I've seen a lot of manhood programs that are just dealing with accountable. We're going to make these kids accountable, and we're going to teach them manhood, and a lot of them, some of them do. Now we're going to get them in school and get them to graduate and have them wear ties and have them do it, which is all wonderful. But if you're not dealing with historical trauma, if you're not dealing with the generational oppression, if you're not dealing with really integrating their cultural roots, then it's not going to be a sustainable.
That makes total sense. And then would you say that El Hombre Noble is the cornerstone of the value system that you're teaching?
Well, Hombre Noble is that honorable man, that sacred manhood that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And each one of those that you're mentioning is a different program or a different training that we do. El Hombre Noble really is about, teaching men how to be honorable men. Good fathers, good grandfathers, good sons, good brothers, good partners. And it runs a spectrum, because, now we're getting transgender men come to our group to explore that aspect of because you have also have men that are raising children by themselves, that are co-parenting, two men, and how do you co-parent in this way and provide everything that child needs.
Well, let's talk about are there any other parts of your program that we haven't discussed that people should know about?
Well, we do a lot of work around racial healing and racial justice, but I do want to mention, and I'm not the one to really talk about this, but I really do want to mention that there's a whole other women and girls division unit that is very powerful and very needed. I really want to emphasize the need for building spaces and funding and developing avenues for women and girls to lead and to guide and heal and to develop. All of that is as significant because we have to heal as a whole community that way.
My next book's going to be about young feminists, so I'll ask you later for people that I should talk with.
Right.
Let's talk about your books. What are the themes? Like recovering your sacredness. What's that about?
Recovering your sacredness is a lot of what I talked about today. That's my latest book, and you can look on Amazon or on my website to see that. But really, it's recognizing that this society and this history has taken away our humanity. It's really wounded us in many, many ways and indoctrinated us and caused us to be sick and caused us to pick up habits and traditions and ways that are not healthy for us and not in alignment with who we are as sacred people. And so that book really talks about that, reclaiming that, and then ways to release. We got to forgive, we got to let go, we got to release. There's all kinds of things that we need to do, but we also have to choose who we want to be as we move forward in a sacred way. So that book gives practical ways to do that, but it also sends us through a journey of understanding that as well, so that we can then make a commitment to that along our journey.
There's a online magazine called Medium, and I just wanted to read you a sentence. I think this is probably an Anglo guy named Coulter Whitlock. He says, "Modern society is destroying young men, a society that completely removes the need for them. They're made to feel ashamed to be male." And I wonder if you think he's got validity here or not.
Well, I think for generations, we've men have been the problem. We've seen men as the problem, the culprit, the perpetrator. And I, again, as I mentioned, I worked in the area of domestic violence and sexual assault, and were early on involved in a lot of the work related to domestic violence and sexual assault. And during that early feminist movement, we were the enemy. We were seen as the enemy. Men were the enemy. I was one of the first people to work in the East LA rape hotline, first male. And I would go to a conference on sexual assault or domestic violence, only male there, and they kicked me out because I'm a male, not just because I'm a male, right? And anytime I'd step in a room, there was always the assumption that I was the enemy, So I think this society, now, if you talk to black and brown women of that movement, that was not their view. But the white feminists basically promoted that way. I think it's changed now somewhat, but the indigenous and black and brown women, what they wanted is they didn't want to excommunicate us. They wanted us to heal, and they wanted us to be accountable. And so they were saying, where are the services? Where can we send our men? And even some of them didn't want to kick them out the house. They just wanted them to stop the violence and learn how to be nurturing. So, and so that's taken a long way, to come. But I think, the residual of that, and let me just say that there's some justification. I don't want to take away the validity of what many women feel from the violence, from the negativity, from the insensitivity, and right now, especially with you can't even make a decision about your own body, and those are men making those decisions, right? I mean, there's women involved too, and you can ask, well, why are these women going? Well, it's the same question of why sometimes black and brown people vote very conservative. It's the same thing. You become indoctrinated. So I think there's some validity for there's a fear and a negativity towards some men, but not all men. And in my 40-some years of doing this work, I'm seeing more and more men that are healing, that want to be good men. And when I say good men, they want to be able to be in relationship, to heal, to contribute, but also are willing to learn and to grow.
Yeah, I really see that with generations Y and Z, that they're really accepting of diversity, really open, not into strict boxes of behaviors. So yeah, I think they're really open. What about your Mesoamerican based healing and mental health practice, Cultura Bienestaar?
That's a book that actually was co-edited by Ricardo Carrillo and Maestra Concha Salcedo. And in that book, there's a number of people, healers and practitioners that give examples in history and remedies, if you will, for how to heal wounds, how to take care of certain things that go on. So that book is full of a number of authors that way, and and it's a good book to check out. I'm gonna need to round up here because I have to go on to something else. But
family violence and men of color.
Yeah, so that book is again a book written by myself and Dr. Ricardo Carrillo, and in that book, there's a number of authors from various cultures, and we talk about the issue of family violence and the historical context of how that came about, through the oppression of generations and through the indoctrination of false teachings on men, and what needs to go on for us to heal. And so it's a really good book, if you really want to get a contextual framework of that and what needs to go on in terms of healing.
You did a book on Cesar Chavez. Was that for kids?
Yeah, so there's a series of children's books. You can see them on my website. Cesar Chavez is one of the books, but a lot of the books I have are books that really counter the narrative. My first book was called Trenzas Bonitos and the Barrio Bears, which is trenzas mean long hair, and Barrio Bears from the Barrio. And that was my counter to Goldilocks and the Three Bears. In my neighborhood, there's nobody with Goldilocks, and when Papa Bear ate porridge, I didn't know what porridge was, but I knew what beans and rice were. So in my book, he's eating beans and rice. So, and all my books are kind of counter and really bring in culture and teachings that way. And I'm working on a series of another 3 or 4 books right now that will bring that to light as well.
For kids?
For everybody, actually. It's not just for kids.
What is the next book going to be?
I have a book. Well, there's several books. I'm writing actually the book on La Cultura Cura, on all the philosophy and the teachings of healing ways. So that's the book that I'm working on. And then I'm working on several children's books as well. But
just a couple more questions. Other branches of the men's movement. There's men's rights, like fathers after divorce. There's the mythopoetic wild men. There's what do you think are the interesting different branches of the men's movement in the States?
Well, there's so many. They all have different intentions, and I think some are more focused. If you talk men's rights, that's important. But I think what you need to check out is the behavior and the example of the men that are guiding. Are they doing their own work? Is it really about just men, or is it about all our relations? For us, yes, about men, but it's about all our relations. It's about the women, the children, the elders. It's about all communities. And I think, and then are they walking the talk? They're really living this. Is it just a program, or is it a way of life? For us, it's a way of life, which is the way we are. And so, I don't think every man's program is doing that. So.
Okay. Anything else that you haven't mentioned that you would think?
I would invite listeners to listen to. We have a podcast called Healing Generations, and if you go on any of the podcast, Apple or Spotify, look up Healing Generations, and you will see there's about 60 episodes now that have been recorded, all about generational healing, generational trauma from different perspectives.
Great.